Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. So today I wanted to do a second video on the issue of a certain content provider. I received some feedback from a viewer. The viewer is Plemen Balev 3632. And he responded in the comment section. Greatly appreciate his response. And this individual, Plemen Balev, was on a live stream with Davidov. And I believe I recall this. And I believe this was one of the first statements made by Davidov that rose my suspicion that what he was saying was not completely on the level. And I'll read you what this individual who responded in the comment section says. So he asked several times to Davidov, why aren't you recruited in the UAF, the Ukrainian Armed Forces, or volunteering for the front line? And finally, after enough people inquired to Davidov, he responded. And this was Davidov's response. Immediately went to volunteer, but they told me my services aren't needed. They, meaning the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the UAF. And the reason, since I have no actual combat training, can't help much on the battlefield, and my piloting skills limited to only piloting civilian planes. So let's delve into that statement a little bit. Clearly, anyone who joins one's nation's armed forces normally do not have combat experience. So any military, be it the United States military, the British military, the Ukrainian military, obviously, people who join these militaries do not have military experience. Now, that's not to say you can't acquire those skills. So what would normally happen is Davidov, would go volunteer, and if he was in reasonably good shape, good condition, and especially if he has piloting skills. I mean, the guy allegedly, well, I don't want to say allegedly, we can't verify this, he pilots large civilian aircraft. Now, if he wasn't in the best condition, a little out of shape, obviously he's in probably his late 30s, something like that, well, he would be put through basic training. He would go through 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks of basic military training that would put him in the needed condition. He would learn the ranks of the Ukrainian military. He would learn the history of the Ukrainian military. He would obtain basic combat skills, basic platoon, squad level skill sets in basic military training. He would also undergo physical training, which would get him in better shape over the course of those few months. If he was in really bad shape, well, he would have some extended training. He would be assigned to a fat body unit in which he would lose additional weight until he was in the needed physical condition to perform his duties. Once he successfully goes through basic training, and the Ukrainian military believed that he was ready to serve, he would then be assigned a more advanced skill set, be it he would go through infantry training, he would go through armored training, artillery training. Now, given the fact that he has these piloting skills, it would seem reasonable that the Ukrainian military would identify those skills. If he flown for Ukrainian Airlines, then in all probability he would be sent to the Ukrainian Air Force, or he would do something in regards to those skill sets, pilot drones, what have you. But to say that because he doesn't have any past combat training, again, I immediately went to volunteer, but they told me my services aren't needed since I have no actual combat training. Again, no one has actual combat training. Not when you join the Army. Those are skills that you were taught. And if you are in a combat unit, which most individuals are not in actual combat units. Actual combat units make up a finite percentage. I mean, it is a larger percentage, but by no means is everyone in a armed forces assigned a combat duty. I mean, he could be a chef. He could be a cook. He could be some sort of instructor. He could be anything. But to say that's not why he was accepted because he didn't have any combat experience, that's simply not true. It's a false statement. I'm sure the Ukrainian military would have gladly taken him. Now, obviously, if he didn't have any military experience, yes, he would have been put through basic training. He would have learned some basic, rudimentary combat skill sets. And then off to a more advanced series of schooling, depending on what the military wanted him to do within the scope of the war effort. When I went through my military training, it was a combination of basic and advanced training. So the U.S. Army, while they do have a basic training, and then they do have more advanced schools that you can go to post-basic training, a lot of the combat arms units in the U.S. military, they're all in one. So what does that mean? It means you go for anywhere from 16 to 22 weeks, and it's your basic training and advanced training. They call it OSET, and it's all in one. And some of these are actually what they call cohort units, which means if 100 men start infantry training or armored training, they go through that 16 to 22 weeks of training together. They go through basic training, and it's in the second week. I mean, the second week I was in training, I was on a tank. That's how quickly they try to start integrating you into your specific combat arm role. Now, I'm not sure how the Ukrainian military does it, but that's how the U.S. Army does it. And yeah, we had people who weren't necessarily in good shape, and we would call it getting recycled. If they didn't think you were going to meet the physical standards, or for whatever reason you failed what they call a gait test, meaning you were, let's say, on this certain gait test, you were required to disassemble and reassemble a certain weapon, and you failed that multiple times, well, then you would be put back 2 weeks until you were able to then grasp and have the ability to disassemble said weapon, or understand basic MOP gear, chemical weapons, nuclear MBC type stuff, nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. So you would have these tests. And then if you couldn't do it, you were simply sent back 2 weeks or so, and then no one wanted to do that because you were, in a basic training type environment where they're relatively hard on you for another 2 weeks or an extra 2 weeks. Now again, Davidov, even though he doesn't have combat experience, would have been trained. He would have been then put into enough physical conditioning and shape where he would then be ready for frontline service, or in all probability he would do some other role within the Ukrainian military that may not have been combat arms. Maybe it was something to do with his piloting experience. I don't know. I don't know how the Ukrainian military does it. But anyway, I wanted to bring that out, and I appreciate the viewer commenting and bringing that information to light. There was some other comments about Davidov as well, but I didn't think that was necessary to bring that up. So again, thanks for joining us. More to come. Have a good day.